Hello again, everyone. So, a couple weeks ago, when I posted a link to part 1 of How to Argue with a Creationist on my Facebook page, I got some very interesting responses. Now, I simply put the link where my friends could see it on their news feed by default, just as some of my friends often post little status messages to everyone about praying for things, or Bible verses, or even little applications that are supposed to tell you what God wants you to know today. Those don't bother me at all, but personally, I do not post my videos about my lack of faith to my Facebook page. It just doesn't seem like the right venue somehow. Yet, when I posted my last video, which was all about science and not about religion, a couple friends that I have there weren't comfortable with it at all and implied that they would rather I not post anything like that. Interesting double standard, isn't it? A couple people left disapproving comments to the effect of, well, why don't you just let people believe what they want to believe? So to answer that question, I'm not interested in pushing knowledge on anyone that doesn't want to hear it. I only argue about the subject with those who disagree and want to engage me on the topic. Actually, can you imagine what it would be like if I tried to go door to door with it like some religions do? That could be fun, actually. Hi, can I interest you in some science? Aw, man. Ooh, yeah, maybe not. Why is this so silly? It's because science either has evidence to support something or it doesn't. Earning money and respect in the scientific community doesn't depend on convincing non-scientists that we already figured something out over 150 years ago. Whether they realize it or not, creationists are actually irrelevant to scientific discourse, because they have no evidence that anyone can test. But I engage them in debate anyway, because it fascinates me how many logical hoops some people will jump through to try and convince themselves that somehow non-scientists understand science better than scientists do. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to call a plumber, because I'm trying to do research on building model rockets, so logically the person that probably has the least experience on the subject probably has the best answer, right, creationists? Alright, okay, bye. Wow, that guy was no help at all. Okay, so now back to the matter at hand, which is giving you new tips on dealing with creationist arguments. I was arguing with a friend last week about evolution, and he told me that organisms could only change a certain amount before the changes became bad or ran out of steam or something. I think this was some sort of muddled thermodynamics argument, but as the conversation continued to other topics, I kept coming back to that objection, and asking him what the evidence was for this. After asking him a few times, he admitted that he pulled it directly from his posterior, but essentially said that it could be. He implied that the burden was on me to determine whether this was the case or not. I said, whoa, hold on a minute. You're saying you can bring up all kinds of objections that you make up in your head, and I need to refute them all before you'll believe evolution occurs? Well, that's an interesting way to look at things. Tell you what, I think Pluto doesn't actually exist. I think Pluto is actually being projected onto a giant projector screen, and it's actually the projector screen that's circling the sun. Until you prove me wrong, I think Pluto is completely fictional. Then, when you prove me wrong, I'll come up with another story, and then you'll need to disprove that. This is scientifically the equivalent of a filibuster, and this isn't how science works. Assertions with no evidence should be and are ignored. Speaking of evidence, not all evidence is created equal. You can give a creationist a big stack of peer-reviewed scientific research websites to look at, or a video with detailed citations, and they will often come at you with an equally big stack of websites, all written by people that believe that evolution is somewhere between immoral and hazardous to the disposition of your soul. Start asking for a scientific source for these claims, and that list suddenly disappears. To extend my earlier analogy, it's like arguing the finer points of rocket science and sending them articles about rocket science in order to prove your point. Then they send you a stack of articles about rocket science, all by plumbers that have never built a rocket in their lives. Oh, and did I mention that these plumbers not only see rocket science as a threat to the entire plumbing industry, but that these plumbers also believe that rocket science will lead to an evil demon torturing the souls of rocket science enthusiasts after they die? Do you still trust them to give you an unbiased commentary on the subject? One last point to keep in mind when arguing with creationists is that evolution is not a religion or a political point of view or a lifestyle choice. I don't care if Hitler, Mao, Pol Pot, Stalin, Kim Jong-il, all of those guys used evolution to justify mass murder or anything else they felt like doing. They didn't, of course, but even if they did, it would be completely irrelevant to the evidence. It is similarly irrelevant that many famous scientists before Darwin's day were creationists. I'm sure if Galileo saw a 747 land in his backyard, he'd think it was magic too, but he wouldn't understand any aspect of how it works. Once we explained the principles to him and showed him how it works, I'm sure he would come to understand what it is. Once we bring Copernicus back from the dead, I think he would be smart enough to understand the evidence for evolution that we've gathered since his time. These scientists hadn't gathered the evidence necessary during their times to support evolution. So as scientists, they correctly did not accept evolution, since at the time evolution was, that's right, an assertion without evidence. Well, that's it for this installment, so thank you for watching, and don't forget to keep my tips in mind when you argue with creationists. Please rate, comment, and subscribe to my channel if you wish to hear more of what I have to say.